So our next speaker is Bea Bruske. Bea was elected president of the CTC in June 22. Over the last 30 years, she has been working with families, as a negotiator, as a community organizer, and an officer. Bea has done a lot of work with people who they worked with her colleagues to obtain a contract for West Fair in Manitoba. And over the next 7 years, she was the delegate and member of the Health and Safety Committee, and was elected by her fellow members as a vice president of the Locals Executive Board. In '94, Bea was hired as a full-time union representative and later as full-time negotiator, also full-time. Over 2 decades, she serviced and bargained for tens of thousands of local 832 members in the healthcare, food production, retail, non-profit, and security sectors. In 2011, Bea Bruske was elected UFCW Local 832 Secretary-Treasurer. In her role as Secretary-Treasurer, she was responsible for administering the largest private sector local union in Manitoba with 20,000 members. She also continued as negotiator, bargaining contracts with some of Canada's largest cross-country employers. Nationally, Bea was a vice president of the UFCW Canada National Council, which sets the strategic direction for the National Union and its more than 250,000 members across the country. In addition, Bea was also on the UFCW Canada National Council Human Rights, Equity and Diversity Committee as a trustee on a number of health and welfare trust funds, served as trustee on the Manitoba Council of Health Care Union, HEPP, and she served 3 terms on the Manitoba Federation of Labour Executive Board, as well as an employee representative to the Manitoba Labour Board from 2007 to 2018. Bea was also a member of the Executive Board of the Manitoba NDP and is a graduate of the University of Manitoba in Labour Studies. So let's welcome very warmly the president of CLC, Bea Bruske.
So much, Labour Movement family. Isn't it wonderful to be in a room together? Come on, it's fantastic. And thank you, President David Black, for inviting me to speak with you today. After a really impressive career at Move Up here, David has decided to move on and to pursue other endeavours. David, you have left an indelible mark on the Labour movement, not just in BC, but right across Canada. Your commitment and tireless leadership helped advance so many human rights priorities, including putting an end to the discriminatory blood ban. Absolutely, all of you. That victory was hard-fought, and it helps to right a really long-standing wrong. David, you've also been a great advocate for Move Up members to actively dispel the false and outdated notions about administrative work and helping to empower skilled professional workers right across Canada. You're also a staunch supporter of Labour education, especially the CLC Winter School, which has helped shape countless Labour leaders at your time at Move Up. I also want to note your service on behalf of your union, not just within your union and within BC, but also at the Canadian Council table of the Canadian Labour Congress and at the executive table. And I really appreciate your collaboration, your very well thought out and reasoned contributions, and really appreciated having the opportunity to work with you in that capacity. So thank you, David. And I can tell you how passionate David is about his union. Back in 2012, 10 years ago now, I had an opportunity to be on the Governor General Tour, and my province of study was BC. And David hosted my tour members, and I don't know that he actually recalls this, but he hosted our tour and gave us a really good introduction to labor issues in BC. And he was so proud of his union and the important work that you do. So it's not just here that he's proud of his work, he's proud everywhere he goes. So I think that's awesome. So friends, I'm really thrilled to be joining you in person today, and later on I get to head over to Victoria to witness the return of the automatic card check certification in BC. Absolutely. It's receiving royal assent this afternoon. How awesome is that? That is an incredible victory for unions, not only here but right across Canada. It's going to help strengthen the labor movement and restore democracy to the organizing process. This is truly an exciting time for workers in Canada. Earlier this year, the federal Liberal government and the federal NDP announced a landmark agreement that will see the advancement of many of our key issues. When you look at the agreement, it's impossible not to see the role Labor played in making that happen. Our priorities are all over that agreement: childcare, pharmacare, dental care, just transition, anti-scab legislation, affordable housing, the list goes on. The relationships and the influence that we have built with this government and with the NDP, and most importantly, the broad-based public support that we've been able to demonstrate for our issues, have made them the common ground for these parties to work together on. And friends, that's exactly how our democracy is supposed to work, and it's exactly what Canadians need during these turbulent times. What we don't need is the constant divisive and dangerous rhetoric coming from the Conservative Party of Canada. Only the most cynical among us would try to argue that working together is not what Canadians need at this time. We have long called for parties to work together to advance progressive policies and solutions that matter most to workers in this country. This agreement will help provide stability for Canadians while still allowing the NDP to hold the Liberals' feet to the fire to make sure that these things actually become implemented. This is our moment to seize. It is our time to use our influence to make substantial and lasting change happen for workers. That we know that the pandemic has renewed workers' resolves, pushing them to demand better. Workers are standing up to employers, to governments, demanding better pay, improved working conditions, and benefits like paid sick leave, which will now happen quicker thanks to this legislation. Thanks to this collaboration. Using our collective power and standing in solidarity is what got us this far, and it's going to help us continue to advance our priorities at the highest levels. We have this historic agreement to build upon, and now is the time for us to push even harder to organize more workers in more sectors and in more workplaces. As we grow our movement, our voices get louder and we take up more space, and that allows us to push for a worker-centered agenda benefiting all workers and their families from coast to coast to coast. I know that member engagement is really important to you folks, and it's really close to my heart, because I know that only by engaging our existing union members can we accomplish the goals that we set out for ourselves. Your drive to grow our movement and show workers how unions benefit everyone is absolutely key in making us all stronger, and your level of engagement and activism is exemplary. We can always count on Move Up members to participate in campaigns, lobbying activities, and labor education. The work you do and your commitment to workers helps to shape communities and makes life better for everyone. So I want to thank you, and that deserves a round of applause for your activism at COPE all across the country. We know that when our movement organizes, we win improvements for everyone. Following the last global pandemic through the Great Depression and World War II, workers organized in unions and built a better future. In the resulting decades, Canada's middle class was born. And through collective organizing, workers built a fairer economy and paved a pathway to prosperity for millions of families. With the challenges facing workers from the current pandemic, the solutions to a better future remain the same as it was 100 years ago. Workers must organize. Through collective organizing into unions, we can build a better future. A future without precarity in the workplace. A future with paid sick leave, higher wages, and better benefits. When we organize collectively, we can ensure that life is fairer for everyone, and we can bring down the cost families face with pharmacare, affordable housing, and dental coverage. We can ensure that the care is there and accessible for our loved ones when and where they need it. We can tackle the climate crisis head-on while creating good, sustainable jobs in communities right across Canada. Over the past few years at the CLC, we've been very hard at work building one of the largest mobilization programs in Canadian labour history. We have engaged with members in every part of the country and signed up hundreds of thousands of volunteers, and we are just getting started. The last 2 years have been completely unprecedented, and I know when I started my campaign to become president of the CLC, I never could have imagined that a pandemic would disrupt that and what all would happen over those following 2 years. None of us could have seen what was coming. We know that the most vulnerable among us, especially those already marginalized by existing inequality, have had to struggle the most over the past 2 years. And that's why I'm really proud to be leading a team that's very focused on equality, fairness, and social justice. We recognize the work of the marginalized and under-resourced workers, and we know that it's a vital part of the union movement. And it's why we launched a campaign on care workers and the care economy. Now, I know when we think about care workers, we immediately think of hospital workers and doctors and nurses, but care workers are also the lab and x-ray technicians. They're therapists and diagnostic workers. They're paramedics. They're personal support workers that do the hands-on care for long-term care residents and those in hospital. They also include workers employed in the non-healthcare settings like schools as educational assistants and early childhood educators. In fact, some of them are your COPE and Move Up members. Many are working in admin professional positions within healthcare and within the education departments. Many work in nonprofit healthcare-related settings. We know that a strong care economy allows other workers to return to work, knowing that their loved ones are well taken care of. Care work is so vital, but it's so often undervalued and underpaid. We celebrate care workers in times of crisis, and we commend them for their strength and bravery. We call them heroes, but we know that care workers are people too. And while they are heroes, they are not superhuman. They're burning out at alarming rates, facing increasing incidents of violence and harassment in their workplaces. And when the time comes to negotiate their collective agreements, they are so often met with concessions and cuts, and their demands for workplace improvements are all but ignored, as I'm sure many of you have experienced. This campaign is aimed at not only celebrating care work, but also demanding investments into strong public care systems. Canadians want to know that the care that we need is there when and where we need it. And at some point, you or your loved one will need the help of a care worker. In fact, you may have friends or family who work in care work, or you may be a related care worker yourself. We know care workers are there for us during some of the most difficult and vulnerable times that we have, and it's time that we are there for them. Care workers deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, paid a reasonable wage with benefits and a pension plan. These workers should be able to rely on having full-time, permanent employment, not cobbling together 2 or 3 different part-time jobs. And without addressing those issues, staffing turnover rates remain substantial. Patients, residents, students, and those requiring care supports deserve to have consistent care work providers to ensure their best outcomes. It's an absolute issue of respect and dignity, not only for the workers themselves, but for those of us in our communities requiring that care. And that's why we intend to fight very hard for change, but we need your help. We want to hear from you and the care workers in your life. I invite you to visit canadianlabour.ca, that's canadianlabour.ca, to learn more about how you can become involved, because it's time for us to care about Canada's care workers. I'm going to wrap up with saying solidarity, my friends. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. Enjoy your convention and being together. Keep up the great work, and let's kick some ass for the working class.